I guess good research topics are found on the pavement, on the streets. Yeah, so rather than sitting at our desks in our offices, we especially, but not reduced with Corona time, we need really to walk through the cities and really get in touch with communities and talk about their concerns and find really our research topics on the pavement and on the streets.
Thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif, an urban planner, and you're more than welcome to join my big journey of exploring the making of smarter and more livable cities. Please don't forget to follow Urbanistica on the different social media platforms, and also let's connect on LinkedIn. Big thanks to Urbanistica podcast partner AFRY. AFRY is an international engineering and design company providing sustainable solutions in the fields of energy, industry, and infrastructure. Are you ready for a new episode? Let's go for it.
Very interesting topic, so let's start, and I have the pleasure to welcome you, Professor and Dr. Sabine, to Urbanistica podcast. Hey, and welcome.
Yeah, thanks for the invite. I'm looking forward to our talk.
How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Just on semester break.
How was your vacation? Where did you go in this COVID situation?
Yeah, it was a lockdown situation, but we were still allowed at least to go to the Alps and have some winter sports. So that was my plan, and we did it. It was great. It was enough snow.
Yes, and now you're back, fully charged.
Yes, I am back fully charged and looking forward to a lot of different projects to be finalized and the different topics to be treated. So it's a lot on the desk, but I'm very enthusiastic about it.
Yes, welcome back, and thank you so much for giving your time to record this episode. I'm very happy.
Me too.
So, how would you like to introduce yourself, and please tell us, what are you passionate about?
Yeah, so I would introduce myself maybe first of all as a citizen of Vienna, a self-chosen citizen of Vienna in Austria. I'm a migrant here, and I'm also an urban researcher, and I'm a very passionate urban researcher. So in terms of my professional life, that's really the profession I wanted to do. And when you're a child and you come to bigger cities and you get this tense feeling in your tummy and this like telling you something, and I guess that's what I had when I came to back then in my childhood times to bigger cities like Berlin, but later on also the first time when I came to Istanbul or to bigger cities like Sao Paulo, I was like, wow, this is fascinating. I need to understand what's going on.
Yeah. So tell me, how was your journey? Like, what did you study? Where did you grow up?
Mm-hmm. So I was raised in the countryside in a tiny village, even on a farm. Yeah. So I'm not an urban person by birth. So I grew into being an urban person. I studied first of all because my father as a farmer was always like having this compromise between economy and ecology. So I came up with the idea of I wanted to do landscape architecture, and I studied first landscape architecture. But in order to study that, as I came from a very practical background, I became a landscape gardener. So I was doing bricks and pavings and planting for 2 years outside. And then I started studying quite late, actually, and studied landscape architecture in a very practically oriented university in Osnabrück, which is a tiny town in the northern parts of Germany. And I was a singer at the time as well, so I was earning some money to finance my studies by singing. So it was like a very mixed approach. But then first I did my first internship abroad in an office in London. So I met a lot of people from Latin America. They are living in London. And then I got an invitation for a carnival in Brazil and discovered cities in Brazil by that. And quite not the traditional academic way, I would say, and ended up in doing my next internship in Argentina, working in Argentina for half a year. And so I guess these international spaces changed my view also on cities and urbanization.
Yeah, I see. It's a very, very big journey, interesting journey, and you have been in many dense and big cities as well.
Yes, definitely. I mean, and just living in London is so different from living in Berlin.
I can imagine.
Yeah, but then when you come to Argentinian public squares and the people are there just dancing and playing music, which is hardly happening spontaneously in, I don't know, public spaces here, it's very fascinating. So I got very fascinated also on not just the built places in the urban form, but much more on the urban life that's taking place in cities, in different cities.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. So tell us, where are you now and what are you working with? In which city, by the way, are you now?
So as I introduced myself as a self-chosen Viennese citizen or inhabitant, I'm based now at the Technical University in Vienna at the Faculty of Architecture and Planning, and I have built up a center here that's called the Interdisciplinary Center for Urban Culture and Public Space over the last 10 years already. And it's an urban studies institution, basically. And we have been running a visiting professorship scheme since over 10 years, 12 years, I guess now. And so we're quite networked both on the European scale, but also internationally. And would also love to understand urban studies as something that we need to do jointly around the globe with different scholars.
Of course. I'm looking forward to the story, and I would love that you tell us more about the story of how the academic collaboration between the Interdisciplinary Center for Urban Culture and Public Spaces at the TU Vienna in Austria and the Center for the Future of Places at the KTH in Stockholm. So tell us the story and of the collaboration.
Yeah. So I guess the first point of that story is the so-called thematic group for public spaces and urban cultures, which is has been in 2010 a newly founded group in the Association of European Schools of Planning, actually, and together with two colleagues from different countries, we founded that group because we thought we need more systematic thinking about public spaces and urban cultures in the realm of architecture, urban design, and planning. And so we saw it like dispersed over all the conferences in different tracks, but it was no systematic focus here. Yes, around like 2009, 2010. And shortly after setting up our own center here. And in that group, as an inaugural moment, we organized a conference here in Vienna and a first group meeting. And actually Tigran came back from the States actually in that year. And he was in our first meeting, he was in the group meeting of this thematic group. That's how he learned about the conference. And that's how we got to know one another, basically. So the first public-based conference here. And we had invited quite a lot of activists and NGOs and local offices to exhibit their works. And we also did some interventions in public spaces, marking limits between private and public, etc. And I guess Tigran became very fascinated with our approach of studying public space back then. So we stayed in contact, and a couple of years ago, Tigran tells me, I'm visiting Vienna, can we meet for lunch? And I was like, okay, let's meet for lunch. And in that lunch, there was really a coincidence because I had a telephone talk with our dean because I needed to extend the position of one of my researchers. And there was some issues with the former visiting professorship scheme running out of funding. And so there was an issue, and Tigran was just asking me something about that. And he said, what's going on? What's going on? And I said, well, we are in search of funding. And I said, well, we're in search of... And then he said, how much do you need? And how would that be? So, and I said, usually we work in 3-year schemes. And then we started actually really on the professional level, elaborating a joint agenda, and thought about it would be really nice if we could set up a joint visiting professorship scheme that is both, like, let's say, that's a collaboration between two universities, actually, the KTH, Royal Institute of Technology in Stockholm, Sweden, and actually between our center here, the Interdisciplinary Center for Urban Culture and Public Space. And so, and then we wrote the agenda, and it was like a ping pong, and there was also another research project involved that's called Geographies of Aging. We call it GOA. And so which brought the expertise of researchers from Stockholm, Zurich, and Vienna together when it comes to thinking about aging societies and new constructions here. And so there have been, and we organized a conference together. We are now about finalizing a joint book after these 3 years. So I guess it has been quite productive so far.
And was it a lot of administration and emailing to make it happen, or how was the work behind the scenes? Was it a lot of work to put it together?
I think it was quite. I had assumed it would be more work, but it went quite quickly. But of course, I mean, universities, they are big ships and bureaucracies, and we needed to, let's say, I guess, find a way to make Austrian and Swedish bureaucracy play together in a constructive way. But it was not too difficult, I think. But I have one anecdote, because when I consulted our head of international office at TU Wien, he said, "What's that? A public university is co-funding another public university to set up a joint scheme. I've never heard about that." And I said, "Yes, maybe it's new, but it's possible. And can we do it?" And he said, "Why not?" So it was also very supportive.
I think it's very creative way of putting together, or of a joint program, like really well done. Thinking like, what is your contribution of the thematic group of public spaces and urban cultures of the Association of Europe Schools of Planning, and how are both centers are linked together?
Yeah, so I guess the contribution was maybe most visible in the Gothenburg conference of the Association of European Schools of Planning, where we were also running a track. There was the first track, like track 1 on places, and the thematic group had organized the track. And we were like, I guess we had 90 papers that would be presented. It was running 4.5 days in several sessions. But what was nice that Tigran and his team, they were also part of the kickoff, and we really prepared a very critical kickoff to really talk about places, maybe in different ways, through being informed through public space research. And we had a lot of lunch meetings there, and I guess that was the most dense moment, where I guess the two centers and their researchers would also be able to meet and discuss. And further than that, we also had like some meetings here between the research groups preparing this Geographies of Age project, but also during the conference. And again, and the conference had the topic of care, care in the city. And I mean, care is all around at the moment. And we have been trying to find out why that's the case, because we feel so much of uncare actually in our urban development. That's why we need to talk about care somehow. And because the conditions and the social inequalities is increasing, and urban design, architecture and planning, especially through the focus on public spaces and minorities, play a key role in that. So I guess that's how the agendas of the group were informed by both centers. And both centers grew in the time when the group was growing. And the group in the beginning, we were like, I would say 15 active researchers, and Tigran and me being part of these 15 active researchers. But 5 years after that, we were 100 members.
Wow.
And this, like self-organized, and we needed to reinvent our self-organization structure, because we had to
Can I ask you that the research groups, are they from only Sweden and Austria, or from everywhere? Like what are the nationalities?
So actually, in the Association of European Schools of Planning thematic group for public spaces and urban culture, there are all type of nationalities, and even also different disciplinary backgrounds. We have colleagues from Beirut who have organized the conference in Beirut, from Istanbul, but we also went to Sofia, to Glasgow, so we have been in Vienna, in Naples, in Ljubljana. So we although it's a European Association of Schools of Planning, actually our focus is definitely not just European, because I mean, the issues that we are dealing with in public spaces, like issues of hosting refugees, etc., they concern us all, and we need to discuss them together. And also now, in that time, we have organized sort of meetings, Zoom meetings, informal Zoom meetings with members of the group, just to talk to one another and update us. And we have a colleague from Beirut who is telling us frequently about the situation.
It's good that you keep the tight communication between each other, so you have the culture and the soul of the group.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess, this concerns also, I guess, those research groups, both the CFP, the Center for the Future of Places research group, that's quite international. And our research group here, if I may call it like that, our group of affiliated persons and guest professors, but also staff, is also quite heterogeneous and international. So that's something, and also the doctoral students, that's something we're looking for. But both working locally at the same time as having a more global perspective.
Tell us more about your the two books that you're finalizing now. The first one is The Care and the City, and the second one is Urban Spaces Unsettled. So let's start with the first one. So tell us about it, the aim, the who's the reader, the author.
Okay, so first of all, the Care and the City book, which is now about to be submitted, I hope, in the next 4 weeks. After the process. Both books are actually collective projects. We have organized conferences to also bring people together from various geopolitical spheres and disciplines to talk about our topics. And usually, as we have these visiting professorship schemes that run over 3 years, we try to make a conference that is relevant for all the annual topics of each year, and that is like transversal, that crosses these 3 different topics. So we brought our visiting professors together, and there was a colleague from Tel Aviv, a colleague from Berlin, and another colleague from London, and another colleague who was soon to be arrived from Zurich. And so we asked, so what could be a joint topic that connects all the 3 topics? And then we came up with the conception of care. Although it's not new in Vienna, there have been colleagues already introducing climate care very much. We were interested very much in the social dimensions of care, and also to what extent. So, what type of caring practices do we find in communities and cities? But also, what problems of, for example, welfare state reduction, etc. What lack of care do we find in institutional approaches to cities? What spaces of care are emerging in times of austerity? We have health clinics in Greece, etc. But also, how is the social interaction per se in cities conceived? And I recall we had a wonderful keynote speaker who also contributed to the chapter with her colleagues from Australia. And she was talking about the processes of giving birth, to rethink the economic approach to cities, so that we need to think of an economy that is not based on single individual leadership and I'm the individualist person, but an economy that starts from the presumption that we are born into this world in a collective world, always entangled
in interesting
relations. So that was something that's completely unheard in Vienna. I mean, giving birth and urban studies, where is the connex? But it was wonderful. It was completely.
And if I open this book, hopefully when it's published, and I will open and read it. So what will I see? Like the chapters? What is the content? Is it like a different chapters or stories, case studies?
Actually, you will see more or less, first of all, a book cover, and we've discussed the book cover for Care and Uncare very lot. We have had so many different with this, but then we decided on choosing an image actually which has a lot of people on it, and let's say a public space filled with people, because we thought that in these Corona times, where we have so much void in public space and this social contact and encounter is missing, we need to project something that calls us back into how public space has usually worked in cities. So, and this is also a type of care, although it's not an explicit care, but maybe a more implicit form of care. And you will see when you open this book, 18 book chapters from different cities and world regions. And some of them are case studies. Yeah, I have here some of them. We have case studies from people living with dementia in Canadian suburban cities. We have case studies from a feminist movement in Argentina that is called Ni Una Menos, which is against femicides and the murder of women, and the structural violence against women in Argentinian society, but not reduced to Argentinian society. We have that case in Austria as well, for example. So we have very serious and very deep topics. We have the case of public libraries and how they can be places of caring for one another in a city lived collectively. But we also have, for example, as regards the aging population of LGBT people, in the Netherlands, there are centers that have introduced a pink pass key for them because their needs might be somewhat specific. And so there's a study on that. And we have studies on the rights of care for public space for children in Brazil. So the care for public space is also an educational care for children education in Brazil. So this is just a bouquet of some of the case studies. But maybe it's important to understand that, of course, if you have a lot of case studies, you need to systematize them back. And so we have 3 book sections. One is on uneven space, social inequalities in care. And we have been a team of 6 people. Always 2 people were responsible for 1 book section. And so my colleague Nico Hen and me, we worked together on that first section. And my colleagues, Tiene Wiedermann and Kim Trowell, they worked on sort of the everyday struggles and contestations around care. And then another 2 colleagues, that is Henrik Lebun from Berlin and Angelika Gabauer from Vienna, they worked on new care arrangements and innovations, actually. So for communities and in terms of urban governance and urban policy. So there is a more systematic
exactly
approach
to put like 2 different themes or related topics. So how long did it take to put all of this together and soon to publish? How many years?
So that was quite a very quick produce because we knew that we would have to have it finalized more or less now, also within the course of the KTH and the theory visiting professorship program. That's why we started prior to the conference of editing the articles with the conference participants, and we had speed datings during the conference with the authors to discuss in person their approaches, and it worked out really well. And I have to thank especially my colleague Angelika Gabauer, who has been so much in the background of managing all the communication, managing all the process, and formal editors who was based in Argentina is now based in Austria, and a language editor based or in the UK or in USA, I'm not so sure. So there's a lot of people in different worlds involved, and it's Corona time, so we are quite happy that we are still even more.
Yeah, well done. So when is there any specific date for publishing, or not clear?
So it should be actually when it's submitted within the next 4 weeks. Knock on wood. Then it should be published this year. If there are another 2 months of delay, it will be published next year. So it's October or January, March. The time spent.
So tell me who are you targeting? Who is the reader?
So this targets especially urban studies scholars and also planning theorists. But at the same time, I mean, the topic of care is perceived and discussed across disciplines. And we thought by introducing a spatial and an urban focus to care, it might also be relevant for other disciplines that traditionally work with care, like social workers, but also all the environmental debates that are going on around care at the moment. But it's targeting also, so it's used, normally our books are used very much or by other scholars, but also by people teaching, because the case studies are very useful as seminarial material, both, I guess, for undergraduate and graduate courses. And as we have a range of international case studies, they are also addressing an international audience.
Yeah, so it could be used also as a material for teaching.
Yes, definitely.
That's awesome.
We will also use it directly because we have been invited to participate with our colleague from KTH in an exhibition around care now in Vienna and the MAC at the Angewandte University in May with our students. And so we will also, with our students, study these empirical cases ourselves and make that part of this exhibition.
Yeah, that's amazing. I really love it, and hopefully, yeah, we're looking forward to read it when it's published. So can't wait.
Yeah, send me your direction and we'll send it over.
Yes. Yeah. So let's go to the other one, the Urban Spaces Unsettled. Tell me the story about it. What is the aim of it?
The aim of the Unsettled book is to try to grasp analytically grasp our nowadays condition of our everyday life in contemporary cities. Yeah, because we have seen so much disruptions and of routines even before Corona. So urban development routines have been changing. There is a lot of individualization going on, for example. But for example, there is now, I've just integrated a chapter on workers' homelessness in the Silicon Valley. So there is a lot of social inequality arising in cities around the globe. And we are very concerned about that. And again, this book came out of a conference project that was the Unsettled Conference in 2017 that we hosted here. And again, we have a collective of editors that is actually Nikolai Roskam and Sibylle Frank, who are both teaching in German universities in Darmstadt and in Erfurt, as well as Ed Wall, who is teaching in Greenwich in London. And together with 3 people from our local team, we are a collective of 6 people. And when we first met together in a workshop in Vienna to discuss how can we frame our contemporary condition, we were just in the year of the refugees, in the year of the Trump election. And on the day we met, the Brexit was decided, and we had a Scots member on our team. So we thought there's so much turbulence and in urban development. We need to come up with a concept that's productive in grasping both what is unsettling and unsettled, but also how we can settle again. And settling, of course, is a deep meaning of how cities have been growing. Yeah, so settlement. There have been settlements for settlers. Yeah, so and we thought there are so many analytical dimensions to settling and unsettling, also on the political level, for example, on the social, on the cultural, ecological level, that we need to introduce a concept for that. And try to, it was just a throw. We threw it onto the table and invited people, and we had so many interesting people coming and joining our conference and making it productive. So it was actually the conference contributors and authors who helped us test actually the productivity of this concept. And this is really a hard project of mine, because I think we have it was very difficult actually to get urban researchers to acknowledge that we also need to come to terms with this tremendous change that's affecting our everyday lives, and we have not yet come sufficiently. And that's the relation between the current social change that's very rapid and it's very disruptive at some point, and actually what urban studies does, being at the peak of trying to grasp what's happening and how that spatially manifests and how space plays a role in this social change. So that's, I'm very passionate about it.
Can we say that this like Urban Space Unsettled focus on Europe, or also in general, like taking cities, different cities?
Again, here we have different cities. I have a list here, and it doesn't focus on Europe. So, and even usually when we send our manuscript proposals to Routledge, we get comments back if, for example, a regional scope is just very limited to just being Europe or something. But we have very interesting landholding patterns of American Black churches, how Black churches managed to hold land back from being commodified. We have hip hop b-boys and b-girls in Vietnam, yeah, as unsettling as being a protest culture that unsettles life in public spaces back there. We also have I just have a look here. We have welfare spaces and how they have become unsettled. And I mean, we have a wide range of chapters, and we have one it was a brilliant presentation by Raha Daher on the misplacement and the identity, a pursuit to belong in refugee camps in Jordan.
Okay.
So
so very, very, very diverse topics and places, cities, actually.
Yeah.
What did you decide the cover of the book? Did you also
Not yet.
decide? Is it true? Is it true that it's very difficult to decide the cover of the book?
Sometimes it's very clear. Yeah, so I tell you, just now all books are falling into my arm. So this cover was absolutely, I had seen that image before, and I knew that for that book and that topic, I wanted to have that. I was already in touch with the photographer and said, we'd pay you for that, because it was just the match for the content. Yeah, I thought you don't see it here, but, oh, well, I guess your version, which is not taped. So, it's here, it's in the Indignados protests in Spain, and it calls Lo llaman democracia, they call it democracy. And this whole book is on urban emancipation and post-political condition. It's called Public Space Unbound. So it was the match, yeah, it was clear. But for other books, I mean, for the Unsettled book, we still are searching and we are assembling different ideas, but it's always, the more editors you have, it's a tricky process. Coming up with a jointly accepted photo that is also marketing-wise interesting.
Yes, and also I will ask the same question here. So is there any clear date for publishing, or still no?
I would say slightly later than the Care in the City book. We hope to submit it by April, but it might also be later. So publication date will be this or next year.
Yeah, and who is the reader of this book? Very
similar. I mean, again, Unsettled maybe is also something because we have, on the one hand, a focus on routines, on temporalities and contestations as three patterns, thematic patterns that run through the book. So, and the contestations part is very much also attracting political scientist approaches in urban studies, or all those urban studies community members that are interested in political dimensions of urbanization. So I guess the audience is a bit distinct than the Care book readership. And with the temporalities, these are all people that conceive space as relational and as a process, and how when we consider everyday life, we cannot just think of linear time schemes, because everyday life has much more circular routines and habits, and so we try to question this notion of linear time in urban everyday life somehow. So everyone who's interested in that can also be an audience. And then the routines patterns is also how do we settle routines, and what does it mean if routines get unsettled? Is it always something bad? Sometimes we have bad routines and it's good to unsettle them, yeah? So in that sense, settling and unsettling are not, they're not automatically settling is good and unsettling is bad, but I mean, we can also work through, be socially innovative when we change certain habits or routines. And all the readers that are interested in that are very much invited to also read the book. But again, students, it's a book for teaching. And but I guess it will also be for those urban researchers that try to find analytical ground in these unsettled times of the past decade of.
Yeah, very, very interesting. And I can see a lot of content within these two books. So, and when you're telling the story now, it seems like, okay, things went very well and you had a good communication. But what are the challenges that you faced while producing these two books? Is there like a really tough challenges?
The toughest challenge is Corona. Yeah, not just, of course, it influences all our ways of being productive or not, but in terms of contents, because for the Care book, we said, okay, we had the conference prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. At the same time, we cannot publish it during or after the pandemic without acknowledging the pandemic. But how do we deal with that? And I guess we found a creative way of including already published papers that link care and the pandemic into the overall introduction, but also at the same time saying we cannot just reduce our analytical interest in the pandemic time. Because, for example, issues of social inequality have been long time over decades unfolding prior to Corona, but Corona is like a burning glass through which we can see how they now unfold. And so that's also a call for the urban researcher community to go beyond Corona again in terms of time frame of doing research, because we need to understand what was the starting condition and the everyday life, the changes in the everyday life, urban everyday life before the pandemic started.
Do you think that in the future there will be so many books talking about the COVID time, urban?
Yes.
So there will be many.
I guess there will be an overproduction, and also, as you see, many research calls now all on pandemic issues. Public space under COVID-19 is fine to have a look at that, but please, researchers and people, have a look at what happened in public space, governance, design, constitution before Corona, to understand what Corona now shows and even triggers maybe in a different way. And that's why I think these Corona-based studies are relevant, but they get even more relevant if connected to a more historical view.
Exactly, to link it together, not only looking at the COVID time frame, but linking back also.
Yeah, because then we think everything is new, what Corona did now. No, we have had regulations in public spaces being changed before Corona and now being changed again under Corona. But I have a very interesting doctoral study of Elina Krenzler, a colleague of mine who's about to finalize in the next 2 years, I would say. And she works on nationalism, everyday nationalism in public space, and how this is represented in state action in public space. But both before Corona and during Corona, and it's really fascinating how nationalist, markers have been set in public space design already before Corona, but they are, of course, played out now in the political polarization during Corona also. Yeah.
Exactly. And also, I had a lot of talks before about like the COVID, and many people think that COVID showed us something very new when it comes to city. But I believe COVID didn't bring something really new to our cities. It's like we had these issues, but we didn't really pay attention to. And now when it's COVID, so we started to see, okay, we did some wrong and mistakes in urban planning. What do you think?
That's very interesting, because I completely agree. And actually, we have been studying that. I would have had a visiting professorship at the University of Firenze last year, and it was turned into an visiting professorship, which I very much enjoyed, with working with the colleagues and the students via Zoom, basically, on Google Meet. There we discussed, for example, the impact now on the city center of Firenze, of Florence, because it's very much economically tourism-based ground floor zones in the city center, But this development, of course, is not just happening. So we see the weaknesses of mono-economically functionalized ground floor zones now very much, and of a lack of economic diversity, but they have been produced before Corona. And it was clear to my colleagues in Firenze at the Lages Institute, the Laboratorio de Geografia Sociale, that they had done research over years on that, and they had pointed before to that. So now it was just the moment to say again, look, there it is.
Yeah, exactly. Just look at it.
Yeah.
Interesting. So we talked about the challenges and tough moments. Tell me about the absolutely best moment when it's come like to your time during the KTH and TU Wien visiting professorship program in urban studies. Like, what is the best moment?
I guess one of the best moments was definitely, first of all, also there were two or at least three great moments. So the first moment was we went to Stockholm also to arrange the program, and we had a long talks also on how we could do that and how that could work. But sort of also being at the Center for the Future of Places and meeting colleagues and getting to learn about their ideas, etc., was first of all a great opportunity. And I got to learn about so many new people there. So it was also a working hub. And the second big moment was, of course, the meeting of our research communities. I recall when the ETH Zurich team with our visiting professor Marie Glaser, they said, okay, we are doing the housing bits of the aging, geographies of aging in cities part. And then the KTH colleagues, Yin and also colleagues, they came in and said, we are doing the public space bits on this aging research. And I said, look, that's very great because we're trying to connect both of you through our lived space approach. And we discussed, okay, what's lived space and why is that relevant? And how can we bring urban design, urban studies, and urban policy together? So, and we had a good visit together in one of the projects that's called Visit&nbsp in the Viennese. It's like a pioneering project for housing the elderly as an integrated form. And we sat together in their library, actually. They have a self-organized library, which is also managed by elderly people. And we sat together with the researchers and local professionals in the library and discussed for, 1 or 2 hours, the geographies of aging. So that was a great moment. And the last great one was, of course, the conference. And we had an official invitation to our vice rector's office, and actually all the visiting professors and also staff from KTH and from our center we met, and the vice rector talked to us about this program. And it was a very open talk and very, very interesting insights also in changing landscapes of teaching in Europe. It was great.
Yeah, a lot of social interaction that time.
Yes.
So interesting. So thank you so much. I'm very happy that we did this conversation. Very inspiring, great books. I'm looking forward to read them as well when they are published. And you did a great job. So now we are almost in the end of our talk. And I would love that you give us 3 takeaway messages to all the listeners.
First of all, thanks to you, Mustafa, as well. And the takeaway messages I would just give to the listeners, if you're interested in the change in urban routines and urban life, don't take everyday life for granted. Yeah. So try to look what's weird, what's extraordinary in your everyday life, because it might offer a good research topic. That leads me to the second takeaway message. That is, I guess good research topics are found on the pavement, on the streets. Yeah. So rather than sitting at our desks in our offices, we especially, but not reduced to Corona times, we need really to walk through the cities and really get in touch with communities and talk about their concerns and find really our research topics on the pavement and on the streets. And maybe the last takeaway message is that this is about academic cooperation, maybe, and I think it's very important if you want to come up with innovative schemes of collaboration between different universities. I guess the focus on urban studies and the focus on public space is a very good idea, because a way of rethinking our social relations, even in academia, is part of our content, so of our methods, and so we're quite good in that, both, I guess, in our work in the field with people, but also in our way how we conceive of structures and how we can amend and make our structures in academia more participatory and linking it also to society. So we need to create basically more extension to society through public space research and do more public space research in your universities. That's the takeaway message.
Yeah, I love it. And also I go back to your second message. It's very powerful that things are in the heart of the city, not on our really like desktop, you know. It's the same thing, not only for academia, but also for us as urban planners, architects. Like, go to the heart of the city and explore it.
Yeah.
And there you will find inspiration.
To the heart that's beating at the periphery. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. So thank you so much again. And yeah, you know, I was asking you all the time during this conversation, do you have a question for us as the listeners?
Yes, I would be very much, I mean, if you want to get in touch on that question, that's something I posted on Facebook when Corona was starting. Can you observe democratic changes in your public spaces during and even maybe after Corona? So did Corona shift our political engagement with public space or any regulations by municipalities. So I'm interested in that impact of the pandemics on our democratic life. So if you have any hints to that, just be in contact.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting question, actually. Thank you. So thank you so much. And one more question. You're doing researching, teaching. Do you have time for hobbies?
Yes.
I'm always asking if people like, what do people do apart from like their professional career?
I do. Not so much, of course, as before, but I have time for cycling. I love cycling. And as I was a gardener in my previous life, I'm now returning to plant trees and being a gardener in a more cooperative housing project. So my hobby will be also in that part, in trying to improve the tree situation in our cities. Yeah, so I love planting trees, and I think we should definitely plant more trees in the next days, months.
Absolutely. Lovely. So what is going to be your next step as an urban researcher?
So I'm in the process of defending what is called a habilitation treatise. That's a very official procedures at my university. I've submitted the manuscript, which is, 700 pages long, last year. And I'm about to hopefully defend it at some point this year. And that is a very, very big academic step. And I thank all the colleagues involved in that. And I guess in early autumn, when this is done, I will have a head free. And when these two books are away from my desk, I have my head free of engaging with new topics. And I have already some ideas, but they're not yet.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
Good luck with all the projects that you do. And thank you so much again for giving your time to record this episode.
Yeah, thank you very much for the podcast interview, and great series that you're doing. Thanks to
thank you. Hopefully see you in Stockholm.
Yeah, soon, hopefully, when we travel again.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for listening to Urbanistica podcast. I hope you really enjoyed this episode. You learned something new and also got inspired by the guest. Don't forget to share the episode on your social media and recommend it to people you think they are really interested in this topic. Thank you so much again for giving your valuable time to Urbanistica podcast. I am Mustafa Sharif. Keep up the good work. Keep loving cities.